I was in and out of consciousness for the next 20 or 30 minutes. I don't know if it was the shock or the pain. The hospital was mostly empty, quiet, dark. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were a sickly shade of seafoam green. The doctor, a tall, thin man in his 60s, didn't seem to believe my story, but he admitted me for observation anyway. My mum was staying at her friend's house with Grace, in their non-walkout basement. I didn't want to leave them. I wanted them right here, with me. But the hospital was above ground, and someone needed to treat my wound before I bled to death. Luke left me for a moment to use the bathroom. I closed my eyes, not intending to sleep, but I was so tired, and the bite was now only a dull, throbbing pain. I drifted in and out of consciousness, until I heard two voices in the room. I snapped my eyes open for a moment to see the doctor and a nurse hovering over me. They were talking softly to each other, looking concerned. I quickly shut my eyes again, pretending to be asleep. I caught a snatch of their conversation. "It's just like that man," the nurse whispered. "The one that was admitted last night. John something?" A pause. "I know. What do you think this is?" "I don't know, Rita. I really don't." "Do you think we should give her diazepam? Preventatively?" the nurse asked. "The other one, he screamed so much." "The family will ask questions. There's no reason for her to be on diazepam for an animal bite." "They'll ask questions when she's dead too," the nurse snapped back. "The least we can do is make her comfortable." "Shh." Oh shit. I didn't open my eyes, but I jumped when the nurse said dead. I now could feel both of them looking at me, their eyes boring through my closed lids. "Let's talk somewhere else," the doctor said. Hurried footsteps on tile. And then nothing. I opened my eyes. I'm going to die? I don't know how long I lay there, wallowing in my own misery, but footsteps jolted me awake. Luke was walking back in. "How's the pain now?" "Bad." I told him what I'd overheard, my voice quavering. "That doesn't mean anything," he said, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "We're going to get out of here, and everything's going to go back to normal. The mayor or whatever will release some statement about a faulty alert system and—" "Stop." He looked at me warily, but shut up. The two of us sat in silence. A few times Luke opened his mouth, looking like he was going to say something, but then quickly shut it again. Footsteps pattered by outside in the hallway. The tinny sounds of the TV droned on in the corner. "I'm going to call Rochelle," I told him. The line rang 3 times before she picked up. I told her everything. About the bite or whatever it was. About the things I saw. I was afraid of sounding crazy, but when I'd finally finished, she sounded like she was crying on the other side. "I saw my baby," she said in a low tone, barely above a whisper. I had a miscarriage at 14 weeks, and I saw this little basket with a tiny pink thing bundled up inside, and I heard her cry. Her voice broke. I knew it wasn't real, but I still went toward it, before Ravi pulled me back. "I'm so sorry," I said, the phone trembling in my hands. "But it didn't hurt you, right? Bite you? Claw you?" "No, I don't think so." The silence stretched out between us. "So, what do we do?" I asked. "Just run from it. Forever?" "I've been talking to someone who knows about this more than we do. she replied. Maybe I should come see you. What hospital are you at? She told me she'd be there in an hour. Richelle was a short, thin woman with brown skin and thick-framed glasses. She wore a t-shirt with some sort of video game reference on it and faded jeans. As she hurried in, she was wringing her hands, twisting them over and over again. Following after her was a woman in her 50s. Her salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and her skin was deathly pale, like she'd never seen the sun. "This is Jamie," Richelle said, gesturing to the older woman. "She's a professor and specializes in this kind of stuff. I've been talking to her for the past few hours, and she wanted to see you." "This kind of stuff?" The woman abruptly sat down and leaned in towards me, like I was some kind of specimen she was eager to examine. "You know what's going on here?" I asked, as she stared at my shoulder in a way that made me extremely uncomfortable. "Yes, sort of. Have you ever heard of something called speculative evolution?" "No," I replied. "Okay. It's reconstructing what kinds of creatures would evolve under different circumstances. Maybe an amphibian would evolve to have wings like a bat, for example, if insects didn't hover around ponds. You see what I mean? I guess we also try to construct what animals might look like millions of years from now, or humans. What kind of things will evolve under the pressure of modern humanity, modern technology? There's already some of it happening. The bedbugs in New York City are hundreds of times more resistant to pesticides than the ones in Florida are. Deer are more skittish than they were 10 years ago because cars kept hitting them. Okay. I had no idea where she was going with this. You haven't seen that image of what humans would look like if they were evolved to survive car crashes. The man has like no neck and lots of fat to cushion the impact. No. Okay. She shook her head. The point is, some people in this field believe that at some point, creatures would evolve abilities that mimic technology, like birds that look like drones, or bats that can sense electromagnetic fields. Who's to say this thing, that you and Richelle have described, hasn't evolved the ability to send out radio signals, hack our entire mobile system? That's ridiculous, Luke interjected. So, what? This creature is like texting? In English? No, nothing like that. States, local governments, they often have pre-programmed emergency messages, like a protocol for hurricanes, earthquakes, nuclear threats, etc. This thing, it just hacked a signal to send a particular protocol. Same thing with Richelle, she said, looking sympathetically at her. We're all sending little electromagnetic signals in our brains, all the time. Neural impulses. Sharks, 400 million-year-old living fossils, can detect them. These things, they can hack them. So, when I saw my dad, I glanced at Luke. That thing was hacking my brain signals? Jamie nodded. It's a little more complicated than that. I believe this thing sends out a chemical in the air too, at close range that messes with some neurotransmitters. But essentially, yes. Okay. But why is the basement safe then? Because it's too big to get down there, Luke asked. I'm glad you asked, Jamie replied, with a big, victorious smile on her face, like she was just about to tell us the secret to the universe. They chose that emergency protocol with the basement because their abilities don't work if you're underground, just how your phone reception goes out when you're underground. A heavy silence filled the room. Luke and I looked at each other. For one, this sounded pretty out there, conspiracy theory level stuff, more unbelievable than Roswell. On the other hand, nothing I'd experienced in the past 24 hours made sense. How do you know all this? I asked. This isn't the first time this has happened, she replied, her face grim. Almost 10 years ago, the same thing happened, out by Woodland, on the border of Wharton State Forest. I studied it then too, but there weren't as many of them. Okay, but the text didn't get sent to everyone, Luke said. Only us and Richelle so far, that we know of. Right. So these things, I call them stickmen, by the way, they only target people with overactive imaginations, people who send out really clear, strong brain signals. It's easier for them to find you, and it's easier for them to hack your brain. They're not actually producing the image you see of your deceased loved ones or whatever. They're just knocking it loose from your memory, from something you've imagined. If you've imagined your kid dying 1,000 times because you have anxiety or OCD, that makes it all the easier for them to use it against you and lure you in. And of course, there's more for them to eat. More for them to eat? Yeah, they eat brains. I mentioned that, didn't I? More awkward, heavy, suffocating silence. Kate said she heard the doctor saying she's going to die, he said in a soft voice. Is that true? Jamie glanced at me, but stayed silent. Richelle jumped in, her voice full of heartache. Jamie told me, once it bites you, it's linked to you. It will follow you, and end you. It'll show you your worst nightmares first, Jamie interjected, absolutely unable to read the room. Show you everything you fear. But when it starts showing you yourself in these waking nightmares, that usually means you only have a day left. I swallowed a wave of nausea. Then I started getting out of the hospital bed. I needed to get out of here, away from Jamie's stare, Luke's concern. Just a moment of silence. Maybe I'd get a Coke from the vending machine. Not even a diet one. I hadn't had a full sugar one in ages. I tried to keep out the memory of my dad before me, in my mum's basement. I had imagined him saying those exact words when I was at my lowest point years ago, when a flicker of suicide showed itself in an ocean of postpartum depression, and that fucker, the stick man or whatever, had used it against me. Another wave of nausea. I pushed towards the door. Wait, Richelle said, standing up, reaching for my arm. I'll be right back, I snapped. I made my way down the empty hospital hallway. Beeping machines, echoey footsteps in the distance. Tears pricked my eyes. I kept going, making a left, then a right, following the signs for the vending machines. My feet shuffled along the ground, taking me there slowly, ever so slowly. Kate! Stop! I turned to see Luke coming after me. He stopped 6 feet away, trying to give me space. I just need a minute, I replied, my voice shaky. No, it's not that. Your mom just texted me, and we have to go. Grace. His voice broke. My heart broke with it. What? What happened? She fell, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She's not conscious. They're rushing her to the hospital. To the hospital? You mean here? They're taking her here? I asked, frantically. They're taking her to the hospital, he repeated. Something twinged inside me. That doesn't make sense. That's not an answer. I looked down. No. On the floor. Something black, slick and wet, on the green linoleum floor. A tendril, like a long umbilical cord, attached to Luke's foot and leading down the hallway. I felt dizzy. The world started to tilt. "Kate!" I turned around to see Luke behind me, frozen, eyes wide. I looked back. Other Luke was no longer standing there. It was me. I was staring at my own face. I wish I could say it looked different. One eye popping out, skin all blistered and pink. But it wasn't. It looked exactly like me, like looking in a mirror. I looked down. Other me was holding a pillow. She held my gaze for a second, then looked down at the floor. I followed her gaze. Grace was lying at my feet, eyes closed, hands resting neatly under her head. Fast asleep. No, no, no. I knew this intrusive thought. I knew how it ended. It's not real. It's not real. I turned and ran back down the hallway, reaching for Luke's hand, rustling behind me. I couldn't look back. I couldn't. Luke pulled me into the room and I followed, breathless. "We have to get underground. It's here." Rochelle and Jamie looked at me. Then they looked at the floor. For a second, I thought I was going to see my worst nightmare, but instead, I looked down to see blood dripping off my arm, seeping through my shirt, traveling in wet, soaky rivulets, dripping to the floor. Drip, drip, drip. Jamie shot up and walked over to me. Gently, she pushed back the cloth of my shirt, exposing the wound on my shoulder. "Necrotic tissue," she whispered. She shook her head sadly. "It's begun. I can't die. I can't." My shoulder pulsed with pain. I ran down the hall, towards the big red exit sign. The hospital hadn't released me. "Stop," Luke begged, catching up with me. But I forced myself to run faster, despite the pain. I wasn't going to just sit in the hospital room and wait to die. Obviously, from what the doctor said, that's what happened to the last one. I was going to get underground. Maybe I would have to stay there forever, or until they found a way to kill these things. I would not leave Grace without a mother. I wanted more than anything to go to her, hug her, tell her I loved her. But maybe that thing could follow me, even into a basement. I didn't think so, but I couldn't risk it. The best thing I could do was get underground. Buy time. Grace was as safe as she could be, with my mom, underground. I ran towards the exit. The red sign glowed brightly in the darkness of the hallway. One of the lights flickered overhead. My bare feet slapped against the floor. The floor felt sharp. I kept running, but it didn't seem like I was getting any closer to the exit sign. What the... I glanced back. Luke wasn't following me anymore, nor Rochelle or Jamie. The hallway extended behind me, stretching back into the darkness, infinitely. I kept running. The exit door was open now, still so far away. A stiff breeze blew in, ruffling through my hair. It smelled of pine and wood and decay. Keep running. The ground was so rough under my feet. The air was so cold. The lights above me flickered wildly. The door didn't get any closer, no matter how fast I sprinted. A few leaves swirled by outside in the darkness. Keep running. The lights above me flickered out. And then I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was in the middle of the woods. Pine trees stretched up into the darkness. The sand, littered with sharp sticks and rocks, bit into the bare soles of my feet. Silence rang in my ears, except for a light fluttering sound somewhere in the darkness. No, 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 no. It tricked me. I wheeled around. I didn't see any lights. Any break in the trees? How deep in the barrens am I? How long have I been running? The darkness closed in, suffocating me. I felt my pockets. No phone. No way to call for help. No way to know where I am. I sucked in a breath, ready to scream into the darkness. But that would draw the stickmen to me, wouldn't it? Or did it not matter? Did they already know where I was? I looked up at the stars, at the slices of sky poking through the pines. I tried to identify them. Is that Cassiopeia? But I didn't know anything about how to tell directions from the stars. Besides, the pines blocked out most of the sky anyway. No, wait. That's not the way to do this. I ran in here. My legs didn't feel that sore. Even though it must have distorted time, I'd only felt like I was running for a minute. If I'd run 10 miles into the barrens, I'd know. I just needed to figure out what direction I'd come from. I wheeled around, trying to look for footprints, flattened vegetation, any sign of where I'd come from. But it was pitch dark out, and I didn't have any source of light. There was moonlight, enough to see so that I didn't smack into a tree, but not enough to look for footprints in the sand. I stared at the trees, but the branches were up too high and too thin to support my weight. I couldn't climb them to get a better vantage point. I ransacked my pockets again. Nothing. So I started off in a random direction. Sticks stabbed at my feet. Pebbles rolled underneath my toes. I kept walking forward, trying to keep a straight line. The Pine Barrens is 1,000,000 acres, but an acre wasn't that many square miles. I remembered that from somewhere. I tried to focus on doing the math. If I was in the center and walked in a random direction, how long would it take me to get to the edge? 5 hours? 10? More than that? And of course I'd heard the stories. Even without the stickmen, the Pine Barrens were deadly enough. Carnivorous plants, rattlesnakes, and a way of turning people around. It was easy to get lost in the infinite pines. I thought of Grace, Luke telling her I was gone, her crying, melting down. She needed me. Maybe years ago, at that low point in my life right after Grace was born, I wouldn't have been quite so panicked at the thought of dying. But I was panicking now. I picked up the pace. Sticks stabbed at my feet harder. I tried to keep a straight line, but it was so hard in the dark. And for all I knew, I was just walking deeper and deeper into the barrens. Then I saw it. A clearing. My heart soared. That must be where I came from. It was one of the burned areas. The fire had hollowed out a large clearing. It was lit in silver tones by the nearly full moon, no longer obscured. Some pines still stood, completely bare of needles, skeletal and black. Ash blackened the pale sand beneath, the color of bone. A few pine saplings poked through the destruction, only inches tall. It was deathly silent. I'm never going to get out of here. I looked up at the blackened pines, stretching up to the sky like fingers. Snap! I whirled around. Someone was standing at the edge of the trees, painted in all tones of grey from the moonlight, barely visible among the trees. I took off into a run, but in my panic, I tripped. It felt like it was in slow motion. The sandy, ashy ground rose up to meet me. Pain shot up my arms. My shoulders screamed in pain. Sticks scraped my cheek. Snap, snap, snap. I scrambled up to see myself standing there, arms hanging limply at my sides, hair grazing my shoulders. "Let me go!" I screamed. My voice echoed and died into the forest. She stepped closer. I could hear, too, a wet smacking sound. There was another slimy black appendage attached to her feet, controlling her like she was a puppet. She canted her head at me, and her lips split into an unnatural grin. I turned and tried to run again. An intense wave of dizziness hit me. The ground tilted. Heaviness pressed down on my head. My stomach lurched and I was vomiting, stumbling, tripping in my own puddle of vomit. "Stop!" I croaked. I was lying on my back, warm, wet vomit soaking through the back of my shirt. Twisted black appendages were filling up the corners of my vision, melting in with the twisted black pines stretching up to the sky. The stars above me looked like shooting stars, moving across the sky, with how dizzy I was. The sky was replaced with my own face. Her hair hung onto my face, sticking to the sweat and the vomit. Her lips curled into a smile, and then her mouth began to open, wider, wider, wider. Rows of sharp teeth, like a lamprey's, descending into the darkness of her throat. I tried to push it off, but my hands met slime. I was pinned by the creature, one of the stick men. It was only her disembodied head hovering over me, attached to a tangled black mess of creature. "They eat brains," Jamie's voice echoed in my head as the teeth loomed closer. So close, I couldn't see any of the barons anymore. Grace. What's she going to do without me? She'll never recover. Her entire life will be ruined. I can't. I'm so sorry. And then I realized. The stick men were attracted to brain signals. What if I'd done something I'd never done before? What if I just stopped thinking? I closed my eyes, ignored the warm, rotting breath on my face, ignored the slime seeping through my shirt, ignored thoughts of Grace. I used every last bit of my willpower to stop thinking. Nothing. A void. Non-existence. A clicking sound came from above me. The creature began to shift its weight. I continued thinking about nothing. Absolutely nothing. The creature pulled itself off me. When I opened an eye, it no longer wore my head. It was twisting and turning, making clicking sounds, lifting some of its appendages in the air, as if confused, as if it thought I'd escaped, and it was trying to sense me out again. I lay there in the dark, burnt forest, thinking of nothing for seconds, minutes, hours. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, pushing away thoughts of Grace, of my future, of hers, pushing it all out and being empty. When the sun began to rise, I pulled myself up. The burnt forest was bathed in the pink hues of dawn. My skin was covered in vomit and black slime. My shoulder still throbbed with pain, and there was no sign of the stick men. It took me another few hours, but in the daylight, I was able to find my way back. After walking around in circles for a while, I caught a glimpse of a road through the trees. I'd apparently fled the hospital and run a half-mile into the pine barrens across the street. Luke and hospital staff were looking for me all night. I was reunited with Grace, and it was the happiest day of my life. I think the stick man is still linked to me. We've been spending our nights in the basement, where we've been totally safe. Rochelle, Jamie, and I have been working together to figure out how to kill it for good. Some guy online, from the incident 10 years ago, claims drowning them works. But for now, I am content to be home and be safe. Even if it isn't forever, and a million bad things are waiting to happen. I'm grateful for every moment that I'm still here. I wanted to share my experiences with you. It's worth the unlikely chance that it saves even one person. Good luck out there. You're going to need it.